Okay, we're live. Hey everybody, how are you? Thanks for showing up this morning to watch Jim do his thing. I don't know. I have to see. This is our first live video, so bear with us as we work out the details and get comfortable. Yeah, so happy Saturday.
Yeah.
Let's see who's...
And I'm going to start just mixing a few colors here, wait for some people to show up, and then I'll talk a little more about the colors here that I'm using, and kind of the thoughts behind what I'm doing here.
Hello everybody, we got some people tuning in. Hi Paul, Jeanette, Helly Luck.
All right, our crew.
Hi Nancy. Gosh, thanks everybody. We're so grateful. Do you want to go through what colors you're working with on your palette?
Yeah, about to do that. Using the limited palette today, drawing from my Cad Yellow Light, my Quinacridone Magenta, and my Ultramarine Blue. I mixed a split complement from my red, mixed an orange and a blue-green, so either side of the red, a yellow-orange. And I'm going to mix every color, on this scene with these limited colors and hope that it adds a particular warm mood that I'm after in the scene.
Quick question from Samantha Fuller, who has been super sweet and sending lots of really nice emails. Yes, Samantha, we will post this later. Don't feel like you need to watch it while driving.
No,
please don't. We'll post it later, so don't worry. Hi, Kathy Carl.
Just saw your sister, Kathy.
Yeah, we thought she was you. No pressure. Terry Mura's watching.
Oh, no, don't tell me things like that.
Okay, I won't tell you anybody else.
All right. Yeah. It's like, what would Terry do? I'm just pre-mixing some colors here out of this limited batch of colors so I can jump in and start massing in my shapes. I've got a grade tone canvas that I took a little bit of a grade green off my palette and just scraped it across a couple days ago, so it's still a little tacky and just gives me a little something interesting happening underneath already. And let's spend a little time and really keying in on these tones, looking at the overall value in my flesh and the shadow, and when I get that I can start bending it around to varieties of colors. This is the light on my grass.
Hi, Candace.
This is not the way I always paint. There is no way I always paint. I like to experiment and just see what possibilities I can find and discover with paint. Different ways of applying it, different surfaces, different brushes, using a palette knife. It's the same information, just different ways of telling the story. And as I start mixing more colors, I'll integrate them into one another to harmonize them even more. This is the scene I'm painting up here. My little stepdaughter Annabelle.
She makes a pretty lovely little subject there, doesn't she?
She's the favorite. I want this to be a relatively warm palette. So my blue's already got yellow in it. Really helps force that. And it may seem boring spending time doing this, but it really pays off. Just a little planning, intellectualizing what's going on, what colors, what values are there. So I have to simplify that into the limited range I have here. So I want to jump in with a plan. So I can kind of map it out down here, get everything relatively compared, and then start painting. Missed hanging out with you this year in Florida, Terry. Just looking forward to that.
If anyone has questions, feel free to ask and comment. I'm here to take them all, so.
And this is just prep work.
Yep.
Just relating temperatures, and I'm limited to these colors, so I have to think what's going to get me in that same part of the spectrum relative to other things. Kind of going with my mediums, my darks, starting to get some lights over here. I like to group them kind of in that category. Okay, now I've got enough here to get me started.
Before you get started, we have one question from Patricia. Could you go over your basic palette again, please?
Yes, I have, I've only pulled out of 3 primaries here. I'm using my Cad Yellow Light, Quinacridone Magenta, and Ultramarine Blue. I've mixed a split complement out of that with my red and yellow orange and a blue green, and all my colors plus titanium white. I use these limited mixtures of my primaries to build the color harmony in this painting. Use a little bit of a solvent-free gel from Gamblin here. Any other questions before we get started?
Yes, one more. Karen has asked, you said your blue already has yellow in it. Which blue are you using?
Well, I used the ultramarine blue, which actually has red in it, out of the 2. But I mixed, from my primary palette, I mixed a little yellow into it to make a blue-green, green-blue out of it. So it's a mixture of a little bit of my cad yellow light, ultramarine. This is a little bit of the quinacridone magenta added to my cad light. That makes sense.
I hope so.
All right, I'm gonna use a big brush and just start blocking in these shapes. May thin it with just a little bit of medium. And I'm just gonna start with one shape and kind of build off of it, trying to hold my value as I move along these skin tones. And start bending these colors around as I'm blocking in. Usually every time I reload my brush, I'm changing the color slightly. I've done a little study of this already, so I'm quite familiar with the shapes. I've done several drawings and paintings of her in this garden, and that helps me approach it in different ways. More familiar I am, more I can let go and explore other ways. Usually first time I paint something, it's pretty obvious approach, but I want to find ways to paint it that are going to surprise the viewer, not something just so straightforward and rendered that there's nothing exciting in it.
Kathy Coussart says, hi, Coach.
Hey, Kathy. Good to see you.
Maria, is your photo on a computer screen or is it a real photo?
That is a monitor. Big computer monitor. The color's a little better than it is on a television.
Judy Palermo is asking, do you always pre-mix colors?
No. Oftentimes I'll start a painting with transparent washes of color or transparent undertone of a single color, maybe build up structure out of that. This, since I'm painting over paint, I want to paint with thicker paint from the start, and I didn't want to have to keep mixing every color as I was going along. So I want to kind of establish a few main colors so I can start pulling from them as I'm mixing and modifying colors.
Hi, Rita.
I'm just looking for a variety of temperatures I see in her skin here. No hurry here, even though it's a demo and I feel pressure to rush through this. Just want to sit back and get into that zone, that kind of zen place where time just drifts away. I'll refine the shape more as it builds. But I just try to urge students not to jump into details and find these big relationships of big pieces and values and colors.
I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
How do you determine canvas size ratio to image, and why you switched to a vertical canvas instead of horizontal?
Often the subject will, give me the idea whether I want it horizontal, vertical, a real long rectangle or a square. Then other times I'd like to explore something that's not quite as obvious. Usually, again, after I've painted something, I can revisit it in more creative ways. Find, oftentimes something that's obviously a long panoramic. If you do a vertical out of it, you might surprise yourself and find something that says more of what you want to say. So no real rhyme or reason there, other than that's what inspired me today, the idea.
And can you just go over one more time the green on the canvas that was there when you began?
This green here was mixed with the little cad yellow light and a good bit of ultramarine blue. So it's a blue-green, green-blue color.
And also the green that's actually on the canvas that you began.
Oh, on the canvas. That's the mud from yesterday or day before. So it has a little bit of everything in it. Little strips of red, I see the magenta, but most of them turn into that kind of muddy green, which is a nice support for this warm palette.
I have a question if you're up for it.
Yeah, you can shoot.
Okay. What are some transparent colors you use for blocking in a painting? And what is the overall canvas first covered with in that light beige background behind your green?
And this is covered with a little bit of acrylic gesso and black acrylic paint. It's about a value 3. If I put a white on here, and you can see that value relative to the white. That gives me the ability to pop light right from the beginning. But it feels like white when I'm working on it before I start pushing into these lighter values. I find it helps me keep my shadow values a little lighter. I'm able to see a little more color into them. If I'm painting on a white canvas, then I use various stains and washes to, typically to build up my surface and just to get some interesting colors and things happening underneath my finished painting. And then I'll just use my Gamsol and start with washes, and which I'll tend to go into a medium light value, and then I start building a little darker washes into that, and then I start getting into this finished part of the painting. But all that's kind of, that process is totally different, but it's building up a support where I go in and paint lights and build up form without having to, paint every piece. It's a way of building it up from bigger masses into smaller, more essential shapes and details. I hope that helped.
I have one more for you.
Okay.
Judy's saying, I'm always changing my mind about values, trying a mask darker, then it's too dark, and repainting. How can I get away from this?
I do small little value studies first. Find the values that you want, and then just be diligent in mixing those colors and find that same value relationship. Finding doing the little studies or in classes when I'm teaching, students will get a nice study and then put it away and try to reinvent it. And those are where you solved all the problems. Have them around, use that to guide your color choices, value choices. And expand on that if you want me to say anything else about that.
I just wanted to let everyone know, Mally had asked for a photo of the reference that you're working from, so I just posted it to the business page.
Okay.
And after this is over, I'll post, the finished piece, the reference, and then I think it'd be a good idea to show the smaller one that you worked on as well. We could post them all together. So if you'd like a nice shot of the reference photo, it's on there.
A lot of this undertone I want to leave to help add interest along edges. I do some dry brushing to let these undertone colors pop through. I'll look for all the nice varieties of color and shapes that surround her. Puts her in place with her surroundings. They're not separate things. They're all connected in nature.
John is asking, how do you ventilate your space when working with oil? Well, our door is wide open at the moment.
Yeah.
But in the studio, I know you have some kind of...
you have a couple air filters.
Air filters, yeah.
Those HEPA filters, I think they're called. Fresh air is the best.
Yeah. Can we turn the volume up on this at all, I wonder?
I don't think so. Like the volume of us?
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything we can do about that. Sorry, Judy.
So everything I'm painting here is shadow thus far. I'm just building all these shadows together. I can relate them, I can adjust them. As soon as I paint light up here, the freedom my brush has to dance around is lost because I pick up that light and infect my shadows. So I just like to stay in these shadows as long as necessary to build it up, ready for shadow, ready for lights. Something I tell myself a lot and my students is don't try to make it perfect. Just build it up. We're going to perfect things as we build it. And that will allow us to pick things, a hierarchy of things as they're important to what we're trying to say here.
What is in your can that you are dipping your brush?
This can, that's a little bit of Gamsol. I'm just using it to clean paint off my brush. I'm using a little bit of a medium here. It's that solvent-free gel from Gamblin.
How are you determining foreground value versus the value at the back and top?
Well, this will be pretty close to what's in here. It's not a real distant background, but it'll be cooler compared to my dark stacks in here. So I'll probably use a good bit of just my green. I might put it over Maybe put it over a wash of magenta.
On the jar at the top right of your palette, that's the little bit of
That's
Gamsol to clean the brush.
And it finds its way into paint a little bit. Alright, and I just keep moving around. As I start adding things, I start seeing things I want to go back into her, darken this outside edge just a hair. And these are making the slightest modifications in value. It's they don't show up on the value chart. These are, I think those little half tones in between.
Yes, Karen, those are geese. we have a flock of them living on the lake, and they are loud. What type of brush are you using at the moment?
This is a big flat watercolor brush. It's a cheapo from Michaels, and holds a lot of paint. It's nice and firm. It's kind of that disposable price. You know, probably like $4 or $5 brush. I like to keep a lot of them on hand because I'm not very good at cleaning my brushes.
Okay, let's see. Why magenta in the corner? Because it's a complement to that green wash?
I picked these primaries out for no other reason than I'm just experimenting with a variety of different primaries. So that's really the short answer to that. I've been playing around with a variety of different versions of just a warm and cool complement, but different sets of primaries out of that. In doing so, you're going to have some colors you can mix more intense on the spectrum versus others. There's a sacrifice you're going to have to make in limiting it, because here the reds and blues have red in it, so it's going to limit the intensity of our greens. But limiting it even more down here in my split complement colors, that just focuses those colors an even tighter group. You have to pick warm and cool relationships out of. That's I just want to experiment with those concepts and see the different variety of color harmonies that can be achieved, instead of having, you know, my typical palette, which might have, you know, 10 colors out. This kind of reverting back to my earlier years of the limited palette, but I have a much wider, deeper knowledge of color and temperature and harmony that I want to experiment in those parameters with.
Synthetic brush or hog? I believe you use.
This is a synthetic.
Okay.
I use the hog bristles when I'm painting lights. They hold a thicker brush stroke, and the softer brush lays my shadows down more softly without as much texture, and then the thicker, you know, here's some of my hog bristles that I'm going to put on a much heavier brush stroke with a heavier texture. That variety in texture, I think, is huge in adding more interest, more dialogue between our lights and our shadows.
What brush size are you using?
This, I would say, is probably about a, I don't know, about a 12.
What size is the canvas?
No, it's probably about 16. This is an 18 by 24 canvas.
Okay. And when you use a transparent monotone color to sketch initially, do you pick any color and add Gamsol? Yeah, I do. And again, I like to experiment with different colors there. There's no right or wrong color, but there's a right color that's going to get the mood you're after. And what I like to, actually have a mood in your mind, not just copying the subject. So you can kind of think about your palette, limit things kind of into a direction that's going to help emphasize that idea. I think that's one of the hardest things in painting, because you have to be very proficient with the language of shape, value, color, to be able to start to understand what are the possibilities, where can you go with it. Spending a lot of time looking at other people's paintings, you can get inspired, full of all kinds of ideas, but I found I used to paint, and I would, through the course of painting one scene, it would turn into 15, 20, sometimes 30, 40 different paintings. And it's just, I didn't have a real clear idea of what I wanted, so I was just chasing something until it looked good. Not a great recipe, for success, but, it's a great way to learn how to put down a lot of paint. And a large part of that comfort is just, you've heard it before, just having that brush and canvas mileage. But then eventually you have to understand we're not painting things, we're painting light, and light creates the illusion of form. It gives us this idea of a scene built on, shapes, and whatever type of light that is, those shapes relate differently. And for me, understanding light in that manner became one of the most crucial growing bits of knowledge to my painting career. And, it took me a long time to really get there, and I'm still a student of that, like always. Just if I have a warm color going, the next color is going to be cooler. If that cool color, the next color I mix is going to be warmer. There are a lot of questions coming in, so
Okay.
I want to say, if I don't get to it, then we can go back in the comments after we post this and answer them, so we won't leave you out at all. Promise.
You want to start asking some?
Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
So
it's like class.
it is like class. Can you one more time go over the basic colors on this limited palette?
The palette began with cadmium yellow light, quinacridone magenta, and ultramarine blue. I mixed a split complement out of that. I've got a yellow orange, a yellow green, and my red. So I've limited my palette beyond the limited palette. I can't use straight blue, I can't use straight yellow. Everything's got a little bit of yellow in it except for my red. And so I just want to see what harmony of colors I can get with that limited variety of, the limited amount of color on my canvas. And that's something I've always been amazed with, is just the strength in picking out a few colors and finding all the little warm and cool nuances, grays within them. You know, look at Anders Zorn work with very grayed primary palette, white, vermilion, was it yellow ochre as a yellow and black as a blue, and created beautiful sense of full color. Doesn't take much, just takes the right relationship of the essential elements. And that gets back to understanding the light and the shapes.
Doug is asking, so do you normally do a bigger painting if you like the study you did?
If I have an idea for a bigger picture from it, I do. Sometimes the little one is just says it all, and I don't, know where I would go from that. I don't like to just copy a picture. As I paint it once, it's an emotional response at the moment, and when I repaint it, I'm not in that same moment. I've got to have a new reaction, a new inspired reaction to the subject, or I'm not going to get it. I've tried that enough, unsuccessfully, that to me, I have to say something new in it. But I will, more often than not, get inspired to do a larger picture from a small one. Rarely do I just start a big one without any preliminary study or developing of an idea. Though that's usually, there's always tomorrow where I'll just start a giant canvas and not have any idea of why I started it.
Judy's asking, I use Gamsol and solvent-free gel too and find it pretty odorless, but you still find filters necessary?
Depends how much you use of it, how big a room you're in. There can be some variables to that, and how important it is, how the circulation is in your space. But it's still evaporating into the air, whether you can smell it or not. I've been painting since I was a little kid in my bedroom, and had all kinds of solvents and paints that I grew up with, and I'm still around this far. It might be the explanation of a lot of things, but I try to be much more careful now. I don't wear gloves typically, but I don't like losing the sense, that feel with the canvas. I still paint a lot with my fingers, but not as much as I used to. I try to limit some of that, think about it a little more. I'm getting a good bit of my shadows figured out. I'm gonna come in with some lights in just a minute here. just to disturb the surface a little and help push these into the painting a little more, allow the thicker brush strokes to pop out even more. What I like about painting is interesting ways of putting paint down and seeing varieties in the texture and surface quality. That's the kind of paintings that excite me. Fetching's one of my favorites for that reason. It's just incredible variety in the surfaces, the textures of his paintings. All right, starting to feel it. I'll start with some lights. Got a little room over here to mix. Let's make a little room here too. Make sure you have a clean spot and you're not mixing lights into your shadow colors, or you'll go through entire tubes of paint and still end up with muddy color. I'll look for my hottest colors. Some limited here, so I'll make sure I put that color down first. Man, look at the intensity of this stuff growing behind her. Let's see what a different brush. Totally different type of texture. Again, I want to resist the urge to make it all perfect. I just keep building the painting. Let me decide what needs to be perfected in it later.
I have a question for you.
Yep.
How did you mix the skin tone color?
It had a little bit of all three of these colors. I mixed an orange with the orange and the red. Added some white, found the right value, graded off the little green, and then you'll see it bends more green on one side, more to the orange on one side, more, to a little more of a reddish tone on other parts of the skin. So instead of trying to paint smooth skin, I'm just shaping form with these color changes.
How did you get the feeling of gesture in the body without sweating bullets from John Kirby?
I do a lot of contour drawing, blind contour drawing when I'm traveling. I love the power of suggestive shapes, and a good shape is recognizable, and I spend a lot of time just practicing, just honing in on my shape making, drawing skills, and having painted her before, I have that familiarity as well. But, I'm worried about the shape she makes, not the detail within her. If I can get that right and suggestive, the stuff inside her, as long as I don't get too dark, too light, and too crisp details and everything, will just kind of falls into place.
Great explanation of your split complementary exercise, but using a bit of the almost pure blue, yellow, and magenta, wouldn't hurt the harmony. You are just being strict right now,
Yeah.
correct?
I am. I'm giving myself these boundaries to work within, and it's for my knowledge, my experience in trying to see how far I can go with that limited palette. If I felt the need later and make a better picture by pushing a little something, I'm all about that. Whatever it takes. But as soon as I start adding a little bit of this or that, especially at this point, it starts finding its way into everything. And I'm not going to remember the strength of the varieties of this limited palette and where it can get me in itself. But whatever the painting needs.
Are there any decisions you make about composition as you progress?
I try to have the bulk of my design figured out at the beginning, because if I'm chasing design, I'm changing big pieces, and usually things get muddy. I end up wasting a lot of paint. So the design, just the biggest placement of things, I want to get that figured out. But as far as how my eye moves, where I want it to stay longer, adding a little bit of this or that to certain areas, that becomes more of a dialogue I have with the subject through the painting process. So there's some of both. Again, I'm just working colors around her. I don't want to fill in and start painting things, and just find how this piece fits against that, build from her out. And wonderful cool highlight over her head. I'm just going to a smaller bristle brush. So I can scoop up a lot of paint, casting a shadow underneath it. So once I put it down, then I can sculpt it. I put it down in the right place and part of it, then sculpt the rest of it into the picture.
Is that a hog bristle brush?
This is. It's actually a synthetic hog bristle brush. I'm not partial to any brand. Rosemary makes some of the best ones. I get those and a variety of cheap brushes. I just like to have as many as I can on hand.
Would you ever consider leaving that unfinished?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it will probably look better at some point with just the right suggestions. As you carry on, start adding more, it's so easy to lose, that initial reading of the picture. We're always after a little more, and I've ruined more paintings than I've fixed by continuing. But it's that balancing act, and sometimes you get, just 15 minutes, you get this beautiful statement that you just don't feel like you spend enough time to be able to leave it. And I don't know what it is about that, our ego or what, it just hard to stop. But my favorite paintings have just the slightest bit of detail to pull it together, but are painted with expressive, energetic brushwork and textures. There's an interest in it that's beyond the subject. Finding that pattern of light. What lights connect, which ones have a shadow shape against it. Oops, you hit that computer.
Can you address the use of varnishing and your favorite brand?
Yeah. I typically prefer a glossier varnish, not a ultra high gloss, but Gamvar I brush on after I've had a painting for a while. I prefer spray varnish, but you have to be real careful. I feel you can pile up too much in an area and kind of pull it up and give you some slick spots. So you gotta do it real lightly, maybe a few coats. But I prefer that. I get a more even coat. Gamvar though, I think it's the best. I use that on things that I have sitting around long enough. The spray, I like to use a retouch varnish, and often that's my final varnish, and I use the it's called Conservation Retouch Varnish. A buddy of mine was in town and had a can of it left over, didn't want to, or couldn't take it on the plane with him, left it with me, and I used it and fell in love with it. I think it's made by Kmart.
Hi, Laura Landford. And Brenda, yes, this demo, we'll post it to the Facebook business page again later. So if you're just coming in, this will be available to watch even after he's done. I have a question for you. If you're,
Okay.
I really like the clash in the oranges. How do you make that work just in the bright areas?
What, this here?
I'm guessing.
Oh,
so.
no, there's no orange anywhere else for in here for it to contend with, so it's just popping out at this point. That's my most intense warm, so I wanted to kind of get that established. It helps me relate where these other colors in the light fall, temperature wise and intensity wise. Now start building off of here. There's this nice shape of light, behind her head. So it's a background piece, so I don't want to get in there and start painting a bunch of leaves. I want a mass. More detail I paint in it, the more it jumps forward. Here we'll mix a grayer color out of our orange, greener, but it's relating to this. And just put a piece here. Go a hair darker, just a hair. I love those limited choices. I want to cool something off. I don't have many choices. You gotta learn to take little bits of color, so you're not bouncing around. You're easing into the color you're after. But if you have 18 colors out, you can just start pulling from all of them, and it turns into a mess pretty easy. I'll try to pull a little bit of that head into the background. See how these lights, that shadow, that light appears as an abstract concept, just creates a beautiful dialogue between shadow shapes and light shapes. And the biggest causes of grief in paintings that I see are that becomes too confusing, not clear enough, not clearly stated. That tells the story. If we start painting details and lose this story, the painting doesn't read. Just showing off how detailed we can paint, but missing the impact of the clear, definitive statement. Doesn't take much. You can put it down with a lot of interest and fury, and if you know the essentials and let it tell the story. It's hard to apply those simple concepts. It's just trial and error, putting notes up on your easel, buy paintings that have a look and freshness you're after and live with them. Train your mind and your hand to work together within your ability to draw. So when your ability to execute equals your vision, you're a dangerous painter. So when we're looking at a scene and just trying to copy it, that doesn't work. When it's something unique and original in itself, that's when it's inspiring. It becomes a painting. It can give you the illusion that it's very detailed, but I find those paintings as well, are still in concept. You get close to them and break them down, are all built on the same simple fundamental principles. They're all painting light, not things.
What was your thought process on choosing that orange over, say, a brighter green like the picture?
My limited palette limits my abilities and my choices. So this is about the most intense green I can mix with this color palette. And so to go stronger chroma, I have to shift into a different color on the spectrum, but it's, again, if I relate things within the picture, within these limited palette of color, I mix a little more blue here. It'll harmonize, but I can't match every color. I've got to sacrifice some things. Like in this palette, my yellow has red in it, so any green I'm going to mix, even though this is a yellow green, or a blue green, it's going to muddy up on me. Ultramarine mixes relatively gray greens anyway because it has red in it to begin with. All right, let's get a little bigger brush.
I did have a question. Can you talk about the bigger brush you're using now, which I think he's referring to that one? Yeah.
I found these on eBay. I was just flipping through for some big brush set of some big cheap bristle brushes, and this was one. Meaden, it was maybe $10 for a set of few, and they're all new, pretty cheaply made, but they, if I'm not trying to be precise, being general, it leaves me a really nice textural brush stroke. It's the first time I've ever used these brands, but I'll buy cheap ones from Home Depot, from the hardware store, from Michael's. These are little ones that they cost like 50 cents a piece, but for non-precise work, I like them. Then I start getting into my more expensive ones when I'm, if I want to paint a portrait, there's a certain quality to the and variety to the tools I need. Oftentimes I'll change my tools up, again, just like my colors, to just to force myself to find new ways of getting paint down. In my classes that I teach, I've painted with ping pong paddles, with
squeegees.
Yeah, squeegees. Before the squeegee, it was a dustpan. Yeah, nice squeegee here. It moves paint around. It does things that can mess the passage up. Then you have to go back and fix it or leave it. Who's to say it's messed up? It just doesn't look like the picture.
And if we can't get to your questions, don't worry. I'll go back in the comments and make sure they're all answered after we post this. So
I start to get a real interesting edge starting to develop. Instead of trying to fix the whole thing, just clean up parts of it. Good bit of light reflecting in there. Shadow, kind of warm that flower and that light on her hand and shoulder bouncing up under her nose. Then when her head turns upright towards the sky, it cools off to a much greener tone.
So are you saying you are using the colors you made from the primary colors as the base of the rest of the colors?
Yep, all my colors, I'm applying a color concept to this painting. Color concept of the split complement off of red, or actually off of a blue-green with the red and a yellow-orange. And within those confinements, I can use any color I want. I can mix out of these. And now I don't always paint like that, but I enjoy, I usually have some kind of concept with my color. It might, if I'm painting plein air, I tend to just kind of look at the scene and just match what I see, and it harmonizes. When I'm painting in the studio, photographic references aren't, they're not totally truthful, and I find I'm better off utilizing some color scheme to help harmonize my colors. Bouncing back and forth between the shadows and the lights. But look at what happened here from the squeegee, but it's up close. It's just beautiful variety in that wasn't totally planned. So I'm allowing something to come into the picture that's inspiring me instead of everything being in the lines and the perfect brush stroke. Painting every little hair on her head. It's just there's a poetic truth that you want your painting to be, and you get the big relationships, and that truth is there, and you can take that in the different directions. But pretty colors. It's a matter of getting the paint down, and then some sculpting. You can push it, slide it, carve into it, you know, blend it together where you want. Just try not to do too much blending, because you can blend away all the good stuff. And painting some background lights. I don't want these to jump forward too much, and keep them grayed down a bit.
What size brush did you switch to now?
This, it's about the size of that first one I had. You know, those are about, except it's a bristle versus the synthetic. It's probably about a, say about a 14 or a 16. You know, on a big canvas like this, a 9 by 12 canvas, you know, I might use a size 10. I find the bigger the brush, the more creatively I have to use it, and it covers a lot of territory real quickly, which it just makes the job a lot easier. So if one brush stroke can cover that, that's a lot less thinking than how do I fill that space with 4 or 5 brush strokes. Again, try to stay out of the little details. Let's move, keep moving around.
When do you make the decision to use a soft brush over a bristle brush?
Depends if I want the texture to jump out at me or if I want to push it into the canvas. So the softer the brush, the fewer or the less the brush stroke shows up. So I said earlier, typically when I'm painting lights, I prefer bristle brushes. When I'm painting shadows, I prefer the softer brush. Sometimes in the shadows, you just need a little bit of tension and a textural brush stroke. You know, it could be the, you know, the right brush for the job. Sometimes I just change brushes just to change them, because I could tend to paint a whole entire picture with one brush, and you lose the ability to do a lot of variety of things in doing that. But it's also a lot fewer brushes you have to clean later.
Are you mixing and applying the paint with primarily one side of the brush?
No, I'm using all of the brush. I'll turn it and twist it, use both sides, just depending on the mark that I want to make. So here we're going to, let's mass in some more of these flowers, and I'll just turn this brush so I don't end up with the same brush strokes. And I'm blocking them in more of a shadow tone first. Keep that brush loaded. And I think the rhythm created with those flowers. They're not just a bunch of polka dots in a bush. You know, they're moving your eye, regardless of whether you're intending for them to or not. And if you're aware of it, you know, you can orchestrate how somebody's eye moves through your painting. color variety in here.
And if you're just joining us, we will be posting this to the Facebook page after he finishes. And if I'm not able to get to your questions, they're coming in waves, and I want to get to them all, but unfortunately I just can't. So I'll make sure that they're answered in the comments after this is posted. Okay.
I'm just thinking warm or cool. There's a few highlights in here. Just being in the foreground needs a little more detail.
John Curfey says you are awesome.
Oh.
Thank you. I hope I'm saying your last name right. Hi, Pat. Thank you.
Y'all are too kind.
Yes, thank you everybody for being with us today. It's really an honor. Thank you.
Now a little more light on the flowers.
Thank you, Shirley.
So these are light pieces falling over shadow pieces. So I want to be varied with it, not trying to copy what I see, but get the rhythm, the idea of it established, and let that idea carry it. It's peripheral in the subject. It doesn't need to be ultra crisp and detailed.
Did you change the saturation in your reference photo?
No, that's actually what the camera picked up. I'm sure it's not getting picked up on screen exactly like it is, but those new cameras are awesome.
Yeah.
It's the iPhone camera. Better than any pictures I'd taken prior. A little bit of shadow in the walkway. Leaves popping out of the shadow here. Back to my soft brush. Let's work into here a little. Just wanted to pull your eye over here.
Thanks for watching, Debbie. I know I have an unanswered question from you, but we'll make sure. Well, it was earlier. It kind of came in when there were a lot of questions, but just to address Debbie, I'll make sure that that's answered.
Is that Debbie Bruce?
Debbie Moore?
Debbie Moore, okay. Hi, Debbie Moore.
But Debbie Bruce is here, or was.
All right.
Greetings from the UK. Oh, awesome. Greetings from Georgia.
It's close to home. getting into that Zen mode where I can just kind of play around a little, let that dialogue between me and the painting start to take over. I like it when I can get there. It doesn't always happen.
Greetings from Colombia.
Right.
And from Florida, right.
Yay.
This is so cool. Anna Maria Island is beautiful. And Pittsburgh, all right. What colors are on Jim's palette? We've got white, cad yellow, quinacridone magenta, ultramarine blue, and
That's it. And we mixed. You remember what out of that?
are you asking me?
Uh-huh.
I don't remember.
Let the brush have a little bit of fun.
Hi Cindy, I think we just sent you a painting.
More color shifts within shapes. Using the paint all around the brush. It's just an area of a lot of the energy. It takes a little bit of building.
Margaret Norris says it is coming alive, and I couldn't agree more. A lot of really positive feedback. So thanks everybody. Hi Jim Carson.
Hey Jim. Tell me you should come down and let's do some painting.
Do you still use Lucas paints?
I do.
Do you have a favorite brand?
No, I don't. I like all paint. I haven't met one I don't like. I try to stay away from the ultra expensive ones because I don't want to like them any more than anything else. But you know, if I'm after I want artist quality paints, but there's a lot of colors I use. Or I'll try to find the cheapest version that's going to give me what I want. Lucas has been that for a long time.
Kathleen, is it possible to bring the camera closer so we can see the painting better? At the moment, it's not. This is all kind of new to us, so we're figuring out as we go. I'll take some pictures and post them to the Facebook business page if that would help as he's progressing. So I'll do that now.
Yeah, maybe we can take a break. You want to just kind of zoom in on it?
Can I zoom? Let's see.
I'll step back.
Oh, I can. Look at that. There you are, Kathleen.
We can get in and show the textures and stuff in it afterwards.
Actually, maybe we should just leave it there because it's a good view of the palette and the painting.
Okay.
Will be a little dark. I wonder if move this a little bit closer.
Little piece of shadow on her strap.
Thank you, everybody.
Now we're going to look for some subtle little halftones where these lights are meeting the shadows of the form of the figure. Try to make decisive, expressive brushstrokes, not little fussy, detailed brushstrokes. One way to load the paint with just an obscene amount of paint. Sometimes I'll marble it up, you know, and just make some interesting little details. Pattern in her dress. It helps pull the color of the flowers into her. And it's a suggestion of a pattern.
So Deborah, I posted a picture of the reference on the business page. It should be there. And we'll zoom out again here shortly if that's what people would like.
Yeah, you can go ahead and zoom out.
Yeah.
Wait, it's not that much clearer zoomed in.
Well, it's nice to have both views. Thanks, Brian.
Get a little more foreground painted.
I have a question for you.
All right.
During the painting, you rarely, if ever, wash your brush with the Gamsol and instead just wipe off with a paper towel, correct?
Yeah, I'm staying in similar values with the brush. You know, See, this has a darker value on it. This has a lighter value on it. So I can mix without having to clean them if I'm mixing within those values, and I'll just compensate whatever's on my brush. I'll add a little more to balance that out.
How many different colors can you dip into on the same brush loading?
Oh, that's there's not a number there. Just we'll have a contest, see who can do the most.
You don't look at the final color on the palette before applying?
When I get in the zone, I know that value's right. I just, slap it on. Even this mud, put down here, it's got all kinds of colors that I've been using kind of intermixed into it. And just at a distance, it reads flat. Up close, you'll see little varieties and interesting nuances. Mix some more of my green blue.
And Elizabeth, we will zoom in here in just a second. We'll kind of do a zoom in and zoom out thing to make sure that everybody's happy while watching.
See, even this color I'm putting down is different than the green I put around it. Same value.
Linda says, for me, the hardest part of is concentrating on value, versus color. Any tips for making that easier?
This limited palette makes it huge. Like I say, I had 3 primaries that I limited down into split complements, and you can just look at any color wheel, pick out any split complement. They're all mixed. The split complement is mixed out of just 3 primaries, and that limits my choices, which makes it much more about value and then those little nuances within it. And that's probably the best study you can do to overcome that, and do a lot more value studies. Just you do it with a single transparent color, or pick white and black, or any color with white, and try to work a composition on just nice sound values. And sounds easy, but to do it and make it look good, it requires good shape and good values. And usually I find and we'll not get good results, so we won't try it again. But we don't get good results, we want to keep trying it until we can start getting good results, because it's to learn, you got to sit down and grind all this out. Have your own understanding, your own database to kind of draw from, your own knowledge base. So every brush stroke has the knowledge of every preceding brush stroke I've ever done behind it. So I can play. There's other people I watch who've been doing it longer, and watching their brush move just it just gives me chills. But having large part is just confidence behind the brush stroke. That's knowing value, you know, being able to relate value, that makes it so much more fun and friendly of a, you know, painting. Makes it much more fun and friendly to take on. When I first, I painted for 20 years without any fundamental knowledge of what and why I paint. I just, you know, I was inspired by a certain genre of work. I'd paint a few paintings in that style. Nothing, I just bounced around. Somebody compared it once, said, Jim, you're like, it's like you're throwing darts blindfolded. You're just all over the place. And so they told me just to focus on one thing and paint it as many different ways as I could. And I chose a little spot in Athens, Georgia, and painted it about, I don't know, 1,000 times. And I painted out of my head now, just so familiar with it. But it enabled me to play with paint on a level that I would never have, because I was so familiar with that subject after having painted it, you know, 5 or 6 times. And I did all kinds of things with it. And it's just let some of that background magenta pop through here. A little cooler color going down here too.
What is your paint palette surface? Is that glass in a frame?
Yes, and, just paint the back of the glass. I prefer a value 5 gray. It was just a tube of acrylic, and this is a 18 by 24 inch palette. A nice big workspace. Keeps me from having to clean it as much, which is something I've never been good at. Look how that just covers all that. Those little accidental happenings. What we call it, happy accidents.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Do you ever add gray paint tube in your palette?
Yeah, sometimes it's just a shortcut. You know, everything, every color you'll come across, you know, it'll find its way on my palette eventually. But I'm usually just adding, you know, my palette's pretty much limited always, and I'm just limiting the colors that I'm using. Even if I have an extended palette out. But you know, going outdoors to paint, sometimes I like to have a lot of grays because it just speeds things up.
Do you typically do paintings in one sitting, or do some take several days?
I prefer a la prima. Sometimes I have a hard time getting emotionally back in the same place in the painting. And it tends to go in a different direction, but you know, there just some things, you know, if I'm not painting alla prima, I plan for it from the start so I can build it and not try to finish it. So I can build it, and as I come back to it, second, third, fourth day, you know, I don't have finished painting to deal with. I have unfinished, slowly building. You know, I would stay in the earlier phases of it much longer. Good question.
Mm-hmm. How do you clean that palette? Do you ever try to save the paint? And how long before the paint's too dry?
Let me grab something here.
I'm going to zoom out again. We have some people joining in. I just want to make sure they can see the reference photo that Jim's working from.
One of my favorite painting surface is an old painting. So I'll take canvas. At the end of the day, just scrape the day's paint on the canvas, and I'll paint over these and come up with some of my favorite, you know, paintings. And much of it's just built upon the happy little accidents that show up. And you get a bunch of them together, they make a nice little abstract show too. Get to the smaller little brushes. Refining these shapes, just chiseling in. Time if a shape isn't showing up right, it's what's next to it. It's not correct. A little more of a focus into her.
You're welcome, Mally. Thank you for watching. We miss you.
Hey, Mally.
Thank you, Cindy, for watching. You're welcome. Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate that. That orange hot spot is working really well. It seems that if you had used the bright green in that spot, the rest of the painting would need to be a lot warmer for it to work. Is that true?
And I didn't have the ability to push a brighter green. My palette being so limited, you know, here by choice, you know, as I'm building correctly, I'm building these based off of that. And that gets back to one of the beauties of having these limited palettes is that, you know, you're forced to find answers that aren't obvious. And in doing that, there's room for some new discovery. You know, I'm going to find new answers, new combinations that, you know, I wouldn't have thought of. I'll be surprised with the results, either good surprises or a bad one. I'll either not do that again or, you know, take it further. Get some cool colors within the warm here.
Is that zoomed in enough for everyone? I don't want to lose the palette, but I want to make sure that they're getting what they need to see on the painting. So anybody could chime in and just let me know if we're doing okay there.
Soft brush.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.
Hadn't lost everyone yet.
No? Mm-mm. You got it, Nina.
Just integrating these colors, kind of finalizing this harmony, carrying this peak around. And then we might have to pop it in a frame.
Would you consider using Gamblin solvent-free gel medium?
Right here.
Yeah, that's what it was. Thank you.
It's good stuff. I like it. Not to drink, but to paint with. I've known a few people slip up and sip their turp jar.
Oh,
Won't say
gosh.
any names.
The pattern on her dress is really lovely.
Try to get just a little cooler touch in her dress.
Mm. Catherine says you make it look so easy.
I'm biting my tongue over here. inside of these shadows.
Okay, I'm gonna zoom out quickly. Somebody asked to see the reference photo. And then I'm gonna zoom back in. Katie, the reference photo is also posted onto the business page. So if you need to take a look at that, it's right there for you. And I'm gonna zoom back in now. You're welcome. Oh, Sharon Gates. Hi, Sharon.
Hey.
You're welcome, Kathy. Thank you for watching. Is cloning possible? We miss you too, Carol. Carol Cotton's here.
Hey, Carol. A little too much light built up there. So lose some of this.
How do you get your computer to stay on so long? I keep going over there and waking it up.
And of course I need a little more blue.
Yes.
Where's the blue drawer?
The computer has gone to sleep, I think, twice now, but it stayed on for a long time. I'm surprised. Sure. Sally Edwards says, what about the right ankle and cat?
Oh, up here?
I guess.
We'll
Our
see.
right? Yeah, we'll see. Is that our right or the
Really?
painting's right? Yeah. Okay. Judy, we don't have a schedule for future demos at the moment. We'll work that out at some point. But we're glad that you tuned in and you're enjoying this one. We miss you too, Kathy Carl. Can you please talk a little about your use of the palette knife?
It's just to obliterate brushwork and detail, to soften passages out. Often, sometimes I just do it to mess something up in order to have to come back and fix it, and those are just creating little happenstances. Running out of paper towels.
Do you need some more?
Need something. Get a little more color mixed up. Big canvas. Kind of losing my big shapes here. Let's get a few back.
I'll be right back.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, here you go. Thanks.
Hey Bob, yes, we will post this to the business page later when he's finished, so you'll be able to watch the whole thing.
We'll have a good finished picture of it up.
And for people asking about the online courses, his video subscriptions are available on or at www.jamesrichards.online. Again, that's jamesrichards.online. Go there and learn all about him. Check him out. And let us know what you think. Yes, Carolyn, I agree. I love the question element. Wish we were able to allow questions on the video subscription. So
We'll be doing more of this.
yeah, we'll try to work that out. Can you tell us a little bit about your studio lighting? Do you have some natural light coming in or using certain lighting? We do have the door open and natural light coming in from the left.
Yeah, I've got just some little shop lights here that I've installed here, more for the light of filming versus there's a little more light than I like to paint with, but and the camera likes more light. I prefer a relatively low light studio. I find I see colors a little better without too bright a color or too bright a light. Even outdoors, you know, I'm always looking for a shadow to set up in. But, so like I said, this wouldn't be my ideal lit studio.
Thank you, Judy. He is a little puddin', isn't he?
Is that Judy Brown?
Palermo.
Okay.
Yeah, she's been with us the whole time watching.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I went in and softened out a lot of things. I can go back again and pull some details back out.
Yes, Bob, this is oil. Judy Brown is watching too, enjoying like old times.
All right. Good to see you, Judy.
Oh, hey, Bert. Enjoy watching Jim. Do you ever use pure white as a highlight, or do you add color to it?
I always add something to it. Try it. It jumps out too far. And if that's where my highlight has to be value-wise, I've gone a little too light. Is that you?
Yes.
Somebody's hungry over here.
You could hear that?
Yeah. I think they could hear it.
Oh gosh, that's embarrassing.
Another large part, is not being afraid to lose the drawing. If I've started with a bunch of line drawing and I've covered it up, I can always get it back. That's where you got to rely on your drawing strengths, the ability to build the canvas. If you don't have all those lines to hold you in, much more expressive potential where you can go. Sometimes I'll find it and lose it and bring it back out again just to build a complexity of overlapping layers of paint that add interest. So really all we're trying to do is create an interesting surface of colors and shapes and edges, all those fundamental things. But if I just block it in and stick within the lines, it gets real boring especially after doing several hundred. It's like, what else, where else can you go with this? Those kind of questions, I like to try to take, my paintings. But where can I go with this?
Yes, it is your ability to build on that is so amazing and creates so much interest, as you say, from Barbara Griffin. Thank you. aren't you afraid that the bright orange distracts too much from that beautiful figure? My eye keeps going to that bright spot.
Still, as we may address that, may not. Pop a little more of it around.
And a big thank you to Jim's sister Tanya, who's upstairs watching the children and also watching this live feed. So thanks, Tanya.
She's watching too?
Yes.
Putting on some thick paint.
Was hoping to, I'm surprised Annabelle has not been down here actually. Nancy, you never know what'll happen. Brenda's saying, or asking rather, what do we need to know about portrait painting if we paint mostly figures from the side or from the rear? I see the illusion of the girl's eyes, nose, and mouth.
Well, you know, painting figures, you know, in a landscape like this, I try to stay far from, you know, portraiture. You know, doing portraits, you know, a much different form of art, you know, and you know, when the tools that are used, you know, need a lot more control, softer brushes. You know, within portraiture, there's lots of different directions to go into in that as well. You know, I tend to I like attempting portraiture. It's tough. It's very, you know, it'll show you how bad a drawer you are.
Right, so how did you do this girl's face?
Oh, just started with a big shape and, you know, worked different colors where, you know, her head bends and faces the different planes on her face. You know, that's where you see color change, value change, and is where there's a plane change. I'll emphasize those colors and not try to find too many other colors within. I just want to see a plane as a solid color, and it turns into another.
Hi Sue from the UK. Thanks for watching.
What's our time like?
Keep it going. 2 hours and 15 minutes.
About time to put it in a frame, see what we have.
Make it art, like you say.
Yeah.
It's really lovely.
Little cool highlights.
Uncle Terry says, proud of you, Jim. Your oldest
Hey, Uncle
fan.
T.
Your oldest fan.
You mean like literally oldest or I knew he was getting up there.
You're welcome, Elaine. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I'll step back for a second.
Thanks, Tanya. Uncle Terry said he's both your oldest and your oldest fan.
Okay.
Got it? Alright, should I zoom out so we can get that? Or no? I have to say that. frame looks rather lovely. We got you, Laura Lanford.
All right, what
There
do we
we go.
think?
It's gorgeous.
All right.
Can we, are you gonna work on it? One.
Just a second.
Thanks, Ellie.
See you, Ellie.
Laura Lanford says gorgeous.
That sounds like her.
Yeah. Beautiful. You can feel the sunlight. You're welcome, everyone, and thank you for all the positive comments and feedback. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be able to do this.
Yeah. It's really been great. Gosh, thanks everyone. Atmosphere is perfect, transports me to the spot. Beautiful work of art. Thank you for sharing the process. Thanks everyone for hanging in there with us. Hi, Joanne. Thanks everybody. And as you know, Jim's teachings and demos are online now. You can check them out at jamesrichards.online. You can subscribe and
Shameless plug. There.
yeah, total shameless plug. But anyway, there you have it. You're welcome. Thanks, Karen. Magnificent. Best demo ever and great choice of subject, sunlight, flowers, and young child. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. Cindy Folk says, so enjoyed, miss you guys and love it. I miss y'all too. Karen, the online classes are www.jamesrichards.online, and I'll post that to the business page. So there's a link to it. I'm doing that now. Okay, I just put a link to the subscription website on the business page. Yes, and it is hosted by a company called Gumroad. They're a small kind of new company, and we like to support the newbies. So they're really great and have worked with us really well. So yeah, Gumroad, if you see that pop up, they are the host of our video site. And again, that's www.jamesrichards.online. Bob says, James, you paint without fear. I almost fainted when you added more paint to that perfect dress, yet you pull it off. That's so funny.
Risk taking.
Hi, Frederick. Thanks for watching, Frederick. I miss you. If anyone has questions about anything, or about the online subscriptions, or about the painting here or the demo, you can feel free to email me. You can message us at on the business page, or you can email me at info@jamesrichardsfineart.com, and I will post that as well. So please feel free to reach out if you need anything. Again, that's info@jamesrichardsfineart.com.
Alright, I think we'll let it sit right here for now. Get a sip of coffee, and may make a few little modifications, but we'll put a nice picture of it up for you later.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining me, and look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Take care.
Take care. Okay. Finish.